Jefferson, don't move. County investigators, this is about the student activity funds. 7 years of collections that don't match what was deposited.
7 years between when and relief were part of that. How could I possibly have...
Tamika Jefferson operated without oversight for 13 years as the front desk secretary and activity funds clerk at Mapleshade Middle School in Michigan. Almost $1 million passed through her hands. Not one person checked.
The fundraiser vendors ship instance every year. The product they sent versus what you reported selling, it's all here.
She would not get the chance to walk away. Within 72 hours, district investigators would seize the receipt drawer she had spent 7 years curating into chaos, pull the shipping manifests from a candy and wrapping paper company in Ohio, and convert that mess into a single number, $970,000. Skimmed from field trips, skimmed from yearbooks, skimmed from 12-year-olds selling chocolate door to door. And the woman who took it had spent 13 years smiling at every parent who walked up to her window. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. Have you ever handed your kid's school an envelope of cash for a field trip and never gotten a receipt? Most parents have. Drop it in the comments if you've ever done that and never thought twice about it. And if you're new here, hit subscribe now. The story you're about to hear is going to make you go through your old school emails when we're done. Tamika Lynn Jefferson was born on the 4th of October, 1978, in Detroit, Michigan, the middle of 3 daughters in a family that lived on the east side near Mack Avenue. Her mother, Doreen Jefferson, worked as a school cafeteria manager for Detroit Public Schools for 26 years and retired with a pension that kept her in her own house until she died. Her father, Robert Jefferson, drove a delivery truck for a regional bakery before being laid off in 1991 and never holding steady work again. The household ran on her mother's paycheck and her mother's patience. Tamika was the organized one. Her older sister was loud and her younger sister was wild, but Tamika kept her own room neat, kept her schoolwork in 3-ring binders, sorted by subject, and at 12 was already running her family's bill ledger because her mother trusted her with numbers more than she trusted her own husband. Teachers at Bunch Elementary remembered her as polite, presentable, and quick with figures. A 6th grade report card called her a natural office helper. She spent recesses in the main office, alphabetizing tardy slips for the secretary because she liked the way a stack of paper felt when it was finally in order. She graduated from Denby High School in 1996 with average grades and 1 extracurricular. 4 years working in the attendance office. She did not go to college. She enrolled in a 6-month secretarial certificate program at a now-closed proprietary school on 8 Mile and finished it in 5 months and 3 weeks. She was 18 years old, living in her mother's basement, and ready to work. Her first job was as a receptionist at a dental practice in East Point, earning $8 an hour, answering phones, filing insurance claims, and rinsing out instruments when the hygienist was behind. She stayed 3 years. She then took a front desk position at a small 2-attorney law firm in Roseville for $9.75 an hour, where she stayed 5 years and was twice praised in her annual review as discreet and exceptionally reliable with money handling. Her supervisor, an estate attorney named Karen Pesta, wrote that Tamika could be trusted with the firm's petty cash and client retainer envelopes without supervision, and that she had never, in 5 years, been short a single dollar. She married Marcus Hollins in 2004 at a small ceremony at the Wayne County Courthouse. He was a forklift operator at a parts warehouse in Warren. They moved to a rented duplex in Roseville and had 2 children, a daughter named Brielle in 2006 and a son named Devin in 2009. Money was always tight, but never desperate. The Jefferson Hollins household was the kind of household where everyone showed up to work, everyone paid what they owed, and no one had any savings to speak of beyond what was in the Christmas Club account at the credit union. In January 2011, Tamika applied for a posted opening at Mapleshade Middle School, a public school in a small bedroom community 30 minutes north of Detroit. The position was titled Front Desk Secretary. The pay was $31,000 a year, with full benefits and a Michigan school employee pension. She interviewed in a navy pantsuit, borrowed from her older sister. The principal at the time, a man named Gerald Vance, wrote on her hiring memo that she presented as warm, capable, and immediately at ease with parents. He hired her on the spot. Her first day was the 14th of February 2011. She was 32 years old. For the first 6 years of that job, by every available measure, Tamika Jefferson was an excellent employee. Parents knew her by name. Teachers came to her with their petty cash receipts and their book fare change. 2 superintendents in a row called her, in writing, the heart of the building. That trust was about to be tested. Mapleshade Middle School sits at the end of a quiet street called Birchwood Lane, in a town of roughly 12,000 people, in a school district that serves 4 elementary schools, 1 middle school, and 1 high school. The building is a single-story brick structure built in 1973, with the front office located just inside the main entrance, behind a sliding glass window that faces the foyer. Anyone walking into the building, parent or vendor or substitute teacher, passes that window first. Behind the glass sat Tamika Jefferson. To her right was a black metal cash box. To her left was a wire receipt tray. Above her head was a laminated sign listing the cost of every activity offered to the school's roughly 900 students. Yearbooks at $35. Field trips ranging from $12 to $140. Athletic participation fees of $75 per sport per season. Dance tickets at $10. Club dues that varied by club. And the annual fall fundraiser, in which every student was given a glossy catalog and a starter box of candy bars and wrapping paper to sell. The money that flowed through that window every school year was substantial. A conservative internal estimate placed it at roughly $420,000 annually in cash and check payments from parents, plus another $160,000 in fundraiser proceeds. More than $500,000 every year collected at a single sliding window by a single person. There was no second clerk. There was no daily reconciliation. The principal signed off on summary deposit slips Jefferson prepared, slips that listed totals rather than individual receipts. The district business office received those summary slips and matched them only against the school's own activity fund ledger, which Jefferson also maintained. The external auditor reviewed the activity fund once every 3 years, and the review was a sampling check rather than a full reconciliation, because the dollar amounts per transaction were considered too small and too varied to merit anything heavier. The system, in other words, was built on the assumption that the person at the window was honest. It had no second line of defense. The state of Michigan does not require independent reconciliation of student activity funds at the building level. The district had never asked one. The board had never asked one. The auditor had never insisted. Parents trusted Mapleshade. They trusted the woman behind the glass. They handed her envelopes with cash inside, often with a child's name written on the front in Sharpie, and they walked out without a receipt because Jefferson would say, kindly, "I'll get that to you by the end of the week, sweetie. Don't worry about it." Most of the time, she never did. No one noticed. No one checked. The first incident the forensic team would later isolate occurred in October of 2017, a 6th grade field trip to the Detroit Institute of Arts. 25 students attended at $12 apiece, paid in cash and check by their parents over the course of 2 weeks. $300 collected. Jefferson recorded 18 students paid. She deposited $216 to the activity fund and pocketed $84. It was small. It was test. The water small. She was checking whether anyone would notice. No one noticed. The bus left on schedule. 25 students went to the museum. 25 students came home. No parent called to complain, because every parent had paid and every child had gone. The next month, she took $140 from a Cedar Point trip. The month after that, $320 from the basketball team's participation fees. By spring of 2018, she was taking from every collection that passed through the window. Her method was consistent and almost embarrassingly simple. She kept the cash box and the receipt tray. She wrote the names of paying students into a paper ledger in pencil. At the end of each collection period, she would erase a percentage of the names, retotal the column, write the new total in pen, and deposit the adjusted amount. She kept the difference in a manila envelope inside her bottom desk drawer until it was substantial enough to take home in her purse. The fundraiser proceeds were even easier. Every fall, a candy and wrapping paper company in Cincinnati called Sunshine Sales shipped Mapleshade roughly $80,000 of saleable inventory. Students sold the inventory door to door across the township for 3 weeks every October. Cash came back into the school in small bills and personal checks, dropped into a labeled envelope at the front desk by every kid in the building. Jefferson collected it, counted it alone, and reported a fundraiser total of approximately $45,000 to $50,000. The remaining $30,000 to $35,000 she kept. She made sure every kid got their prize. The top sellers got the inflatable couch and the remote control car promised in the catalog. The class with the highest participation got the pizza party. The teachers got their classroom rewards. Every yearbook arrived. Every field trip ran. Every uniform was ordered. Every dance got a DJ, because the operational genius of the scheme was not the taking, it was the disguising. As long as nothing felt missing to the families, nothing was missing. The receipt drawer she maintained became, by 2019, a deliberately constructed mess. Triplicate receipts torn out of order. Sticky notes attached to deposit slips with references to receipts that did not exist. Carbon copies missing their originals. Originals missing their carbons. 2 parallel ledgers in 2 different handwriting styles, both hers, both kept in 2 different binders, neither one ever cross-referencing the other. She told colleagues she was just not a computer person. She told the principal she could not switch systems mid-year because the kids would suffer. When the district hired a temporary bookkeeper in 2020 and floated the idea of digitizing the activity fund, Jefferson smiled and said she would love that, truly. But the principal at the time agreed with her that the transition would be too disruptive mid-year, and the project was tabled. She raised the same concern again in 2021 and 2022. Each time it was tabled again. Each year, the principal who tabled it was a different principal, because Mapleshade went through 4 building leaders in those 7 years, and the only constant in the front office was the woman behind the glass. The escalation in her own life was visible to anyone who looked. In 2019, she and Marcus bought a 4-bedroom house in a newer subdivision in Macomb Township for $278,000. With a $60,000 down payment, paid in cash, she described to the loan officer as savings. In 2020, she paid full cash for a 2019 Cadillac XT5 at a dealership in Sterling Heights, walking in with a brown paper envelope and walking out with the keys. In 2021, she took her daughter to Disney World for spring break and put $3,400 on a vacation in $20 bills at the resort front desk. In 2022, her husband received what the family told relatives was a settlement from a workplace injury that covered everything. The settlement was real. The settlement covered nothing. The settlement was $11,400. No one at the school district asked. No one in the family asked either. The Jefferson Hollins household was, by 2022, living a quietly upper-middle-class life on what was on paper a combined household income of $71,000 a year, and no one in the room was willing to say the math out loud. The end began with a hire. In July 2023, the Mapleshade district hired a new business administrator named Diane Kowalski. She was 48 years old, a certified public accountant, and she had spent the previous decade running the business office at a larger district in Oakland County. She arrived with a mandate from a new school board to bring every building's financial operations onto a single piece of accounting software called Active Fund, designed specifically for K-12 student activity accounting. Kowalski began the rollout at the high school, where the bookkeeping was already largely digital. She moved to the elementary buildings next. Mapleshade Middle School was scheduled for last because, as the outgoing superintendent had told her on his way out the door, their secretary keeps everything on paper, but she's been there forever, and the books always balance. The books did balance. On paper, they balanced perfectly. That was the first thing that struck Kowalski as strange. She arrived at Mapleshade on a Tuesday morning in late October 2023 with a laptop, a thumb drive, and a list of questions. Jefferson, behind the glass at the front desk, greeted her warmly, offered her coffee from the staff lounge, and apologized in advance for what she called her messy little system. She walked Kowalski to a back office, set down 4 3-ring binders and a banker's box of loose receipts, and said she would be glad to answer any questions. Then she went back to the front desk and resumed her morning. A line of parents was already forming. Kowalski opened the first binder, and within 40 minutes felt something she would later describe to investigators as a professional alarm bell. The receipts were not just disorganized. They were disorganized in a particular way. Numbered triplicate forms with missing carbons. Deposit slips referencing receipt numbers that were not in the binder. 2 ledgers in the same handwriting that reported different totals for the same fundraiser. Sticky notes that referenced phone calls that had supposedly occurred years earlier and that no one alive could verify. She did not say anything that day. She thanked Jefferson, packed her laptop, and drove back to the district office in silence. That evening, she called the candy and wrapping paper vendor, Sunshine Sales in Cincinnati, and asked them to email her the shipping manifests for every order Mapleshade Middle had placed in the previous 5 years. The manifests arrived in her inbox the next morning. She opened them at her kitchen table at 6:37 a.m. With a cup of black coffee in her hand and the local news muted on the television, and read down the columns. The numbers were not close. The numbers were not even in the same neighborhood. By the second week of November 2023, Kowalski had assembled what would become the spine of the criminal case. She pulled 5 years of Sunshine Sales shipping manifests. She pulled the field trip vendor invoices from the Detroit Institute of Arts, Cedar Point, the Henry Ford Museum, and Greenfield Village. She pulled the athletic participation rosters maintained by the coaching staff in 3 sports. She pulled the yearbook publisher's annual order confirmations, and she pulled the school's deposit records as reported by Jefferson, line by line, year by year. She built a single spreadsheet, columns for what was shipped, columns for what was served, columns for what was rostered, columns for what was deposited, a final column for the difference. The difference was $970,000 in change, spread over 7 school years. She brought the spreadsheet to the district superintendent on the morning of the 28th of November, 2023. The superintendent, a man named Anthony DeRosa, looked at it for 90 seconds and then called the district's attorney. The attorney called the Mapleshade Police Department, which referred the case to the county sheriff's financial crimes unit because of the dollar amount. A detective named Sergeant Renee Whitlock was assigned. She was 41 years old, 11 years in the unit, and she had handled embezzlement cases in school districts before. She told Kowalski to keep working as normal and to not, under any circumstances, change anything in the way the front office operated. Tamika Jefferson was to feel exactly as safe on December 1st as she had felt on November 1st. Over the next 8 weeks, Whitlock and a forensic accountant from the prosecutor's office subpoenaed Jefferson's personal bank records. They found a pattern that was unmistakable. Cash deposits to a Comerica checking account, structured almost always in amounts just under $10,000 to avoid federal reporting requirements. Deposits clustered in the 2 weeks following every major collection period at the school. A second account at a credit union held an additional $61,000 in cash deposits that had never been reported as income on her joint tax returns. They pulled 5 years of tax filings. Her household had reported a combined income of approximately $71,000 annually. Her household had spent, in the same 5 years, more than $340,000 beyond that reported income, almost all of it in cash. The Cadillac, the down payment, the vacation, the new kitchen appliances, the orthodontia for both children, the cash gifts to her mother every Christmas, the smoking gun, the one piece that Whitlock would later call the document that closed it, was the Sunshine Sales Manifest for the 2022 fall fundraiser. Mapleshade had received $79,400 of saleable inventory. Every box had been signed for at the loading dock by Jefferson herself, in her own handwriting, on a printed form the vendor retained as a matter of corporate policy. Jefferson had reported fundraiser proceeds for that year of $47,200. The school had sold the candy. The parents had paid. The children had handed in their envelopes. The $32,000 gap had not been a loss. It had been a withdrawal. We're heading into the arrest now. Before we get there, let me know in the comments how long you think it should take before someone notices nearly $1 million is missing from a school's books. Drop a year, then hit subscribe, because cases like this one rarely get the coverage they deserve, and on this channel, they do. The arrest happened at 6:52 a.m. on Thursday, the 8th of February 2024, in the parking lot of Mapleshade Middle School. Jefferson had just parked her Cadillac in her usual spot in the second row, 3 spaces from the side entrance. She was carrying a thermal coffee mug and a tote bag with a Mapleshade Mustang's logo printed across the side. She was wearing a navy cardigan and gray slacks, and the same flat black shoes she had worn for years. 2 unmarked vehicles pulled in behind her. Sergeant Whitlock and a deputy named Officer Brian Castellanos approached on foot. A third vehicle, with the search warrant team, idled at the curb. Whitlock. Tamika Jefferson? Jefferson. Yes, ma'am. Good morning. Whitlock. I'm Sergeant Whitlock with the County Sheriff's Office. We have a warrant for your arrest. The thermal mug dropped first. It hit the asphalt and rolled under the rear tire of the Cadillac. The tote bag slid off her shoulder a moment later. Her hand went to her mouth. Jefferson. For what? Whitlock. Embezzlement. Multiple counts. Falsifying records. We also have a search warrant for your office and your residence. Jefferson. I don't know what you're talking about. Whitlock. Ma'am, we have your bank records. We have the vendor manifests. We have the deposit history. We have everything. Jefferson. There has to be a mistake. The principal signs the deposit slips. I just collect the money. I just hand it in. You need to talk to the principal. The principal signs everything. Whitlock, ma'am, please turn around and place your hands behind your back. Jefferson, this is going to embarrass my children. Please, can we do this somewhere else? Please, the buses are coming in 20 minutes. The parents are going to drive through here. Whitlock, ma'am, turn around, now. She turned around. Castellanos placed her in handcuffs. As he walked her to the unmarked vehicle, she said one more thing, quietly, almost to herself, in the kind of voice a person uses when they want a witness, but can only find themselves. Jefferson, I made sure all the kids got their stuff. She said it like she thought it mattered. Those were the last words she spoke to anyone from her workplace. The search warrants were executed simultaneously. At the school, investigators removed 23 bankers' boxes of receipts, ledgers, deposit slips, and personal correspondence from Jefferson's office and from a locked file cabinet in a back storage room that the new principal had never been given a key to. At the residence in Macomb Township, they recovered $41,000 in cash inside a fireproof lockbox in the master bedroom closet, a separate envelope of $19,000 taped to the underside of a dresser drawer, and a handwritten notebook in the nightstand that listed every fundraiser proceeds total from 2017 through 2023, with 2 columns, one labeled reported and one labeled actual. The difference between the 2 columns, summed at the bottom of the notebook in her own handwriting, was $964,800. She had been keeping her own books, in pencil, in the room where she slept. She was charged on the 9th of February, 2024, with 1 count of embezzlement by a public employee under Michigan compiled laws, Section 750. 175. 1 count of embezzlement over $100,000 under MCL Section 750. 174 subsection 7, which carries a statutory maximum of 20 years in state prison, and 43 counts of falsifying records. Bond was set at $150,000 cash or surety by Circuit Judge Maureen Halsey. She posted 10% through a bondsman that afternoon and was released to her sister's house under electronic monitoring. Her attorney, a Detroit defense lawyer named Philip Marchetti, entered a not guilty plea at her arraignment on February 22nd. He told reporters outside the courthouse that his client had been a dedicated employee for 13 years and that the financial picture, in his words, was far more complicated than the prosecutor's narrative suggests. Privately, multiple sources told the local paper that Marchetti was already in discussions about a plea agreement that would acknowledge the dollar amount in exchange for a recommendation under the statutory ceiling. The civil side moved faster than the criminal side. The school district froze her pension on February 9th, suspended her without pay on February 12th, and on February 19th formally terminated her employment for cause. The district filed a separate civil suit on March 4th, seeking full restitution of $970,000 plus interest, and pursued a lien against the Macomb Township house. By the end of March, the Cadillac had been seized, the lockbox cash had been seized, and the family's bank accounts had been frozen, pending forfeiture proceedings. The parents of Mapleshade learned about it from a 1-page letter sent home in backpacks on February 12th. The new principal, a woman named Jennifer Riley, who had inherited the building in August, stood in front of a PTO meeting in the cafeteria on a Monday night in late February and tried to explain how nearly $1 million could have gone missing without anyone noticing. The parents asked, more than once, where their fundraiser money had actually gone. The principal could not answer with anything more than a number. One mother stood up in the back of the room and said, quietly, "My son sold $320 of wrapping paper. He went to 12 houses in the rain. Where did that money go?" The principal did not have an answer for that either. At the time of this case file, Tamika Jefferson is out on bond, living in the Macomb Township house, pending its forced sale, with an ankle monitor restricting her travel to her attorney's office, the courthouse, and the grocery store. Her trial is scheduled for late 2024. The prosecutor, an assistant prosecutor named Kelsey Brandt, has indicated she will seek the statutory maximum on the embezzlement over $100,000 count. Marchetti has indicated he will fight it. The Mapleshade School District has spent $86,000 on the active fund rollout and the forensic review, and an outside auditor who now visits every building once a quarter. Every activity fund deposit is now reconciled against vendor records within 72 hours. 2 parents serve on a new volunteer audit committee. The front desk window has a second chair behind it now, occupied on rotation by a district business office staffer. The kids at Mapleshade still got their field trips this year. The yearbook still came out on schedule. The fundraiser still ran in October. It is being administered, for the first time in 13 years, by someone other than Tamika Jefferson. This case was infuriating in a way the small ones never are. But the case on your screen right now is worse. Click it.